Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have some terrifying subscriber submitted encounters out of that great state of Arkansas. Before we jump into those encounters, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It'll only take 1 second. And please leave a comment. Because all those things, guys, they really do help. And they definitely matter. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump over to that great state of Arkansas for some subscriber submitted encounters. Shall we? Alright guys, let's jump right into it. Hey Jeff, my name is Michelle. I'm 54 years old. My husband Carl is 46. We are both prior military, and my husband has seen combat on more than one occasion. He suffers from severe PTSD. We both have our bachelors from UCA, and we've been happily married for 21 years now. So we are not a couple of flakes. I grew up in the foothills of the Ozarks in a town called Shirley, which only has a population of 336. So I occupied myself in the woods growing up. In fact, when I wasn't in school, that's where I'd be found. My dad was a rock mason and wood carver. Being his only child, I was raised a tomboy. He taught me about plants, animals, and how to hunt. So I'm very familiar with the woods here in Arkansas. My husband grew up in the shadow of the White Rock Mountain in a little community called Pleasant View here in Arkansas. His father served as Special Forces during the Vietnam War and taught him how to be a survivalist from birth. So we are both at home in the forest, to say the least. Back in 2010, we were spending the night with a friend of ours by the name of Austin. He and my husband are very close. He lived in an old single-wide trailer that sat on a hill, in a way so that the one end was higher than the other. The tongue end was about 1 foot off the ground, and the other was about 4.5 feet off the ground. So the small sideways rectangular window in the bathroom was about 8 feet off the ground. Austin lives in a community that is way out in the sticks, just outside of Plummerville, Arkansas, which we will not mention in order to respect his privacy. It was a pleasant summer evening, and we were all hanging around the house. Carl got up to use the restroom as the rest of us were talking. He hadn't been there long. When I heard him calling my name, I noticed that his tone sounded off and strange. I rushed back to the bathroom to see what was going on, and when I opened the door, the first thing I heard was a low, rumbling growl. I looked at my husband, who was still seated on the toilet with a shocked look on his face, his pants around his ankles, and I asked him, "What was that?" He said, "I don't know." With it being dark out, I couldn't see anything out that long, skinny window, so I ran over and turned out the light and went back to the window. The street light was just out of my line of sight, but it was still illuminating that end of the yard. There was a small strip of mowed grass at the end of the trailer, and then it was just some short brush. All I could see was a large mass on all fours parting the tall grass and shrubbery. It looked to be about 4 feet across the shoulders and at least 6 feet long from shoulder to butt. I did not see a tail. I turned around and asked him what had just happened. He told me that he had just come into the bathroom and sat down when he heard this loud growl that made his insides vibrate. He tried to yell for me, but didn't want to be loud at the same time. He says it had growled a low rumbling growl that was similar to the one that I had just heard. I know that what we heard was no dog, no coyote or bear, none of which could ever growl like that. Only my husband heard the first and the loudest, scariest growl/snarl of all, which scared him stiff. He said he had felt all the blood in his body pour down to his feet. Worst of all, the window was open, and he could feel that first growl, literally, on the back of his neck. That window had a screen which was only a couple of feet away from the back of his neck. It was one of those turn handle with the blades of glass that opens from top to bottom, 8 feet off the ground. He was afraid to turn around and look out the window. He swore it sounded like a werewolf from the movie and was canine for sure, and doesn't remember any smells. At this time, we never researched or even knew about Dogman or werewolves. My husband says that when he was sitting on the toilet, the beast growled on his neck. It was the scariest moment of his entire life, and coming from someone who has seen the absolute worst and best of humanity. He said if he hadn't been on the toilet, he'd probably wet or soil himself. Also, Austin had a Pitbull outside tied to the back corner of the trailer, almost right next to the window that was located behind my husband as he did his business. We never heard a peep out of her during all of this. This all happened late in the evening, and in the morning we found out why. She was lying in the yard with her chest and stomach ripped out and all contents gone. We felt so bad for her. Carl thinks he interrupted the beast while it was eating her, and it voiced its displeasure. A few years later, in 2014 or 15, we were in Bush, Arkansas, and we had 10 acres with a medium-sized creek that ran down the backside of our property, which empties into the White River at the southeast corner of our land. Beyond that creek, at the backside of the property, is the Army Corps of Engineer land. Our property was roughly rectangular in shape. The road we lived down was a dead end and became our long, curvy driveway. Our house was in the middle of that acreage. You couldn't see the house from our steel gate at the entrance. If you are standing at the end of our driveway, the house and shed would be on your right, and the only house that was close to us was back down the drive to the left of our gate about 150 feet, and had 2 8x8 metal sheds at the end of a single wide mobile home. Their fence ran down the length of our driveway. The first time something happened, I was taking Sugar Bear, our miniature poodle, to go to the bathroom, roughly 2 in the morning. I usually walked her on a leash because there are a bobcat, coyote, and my husband even went face to face with a mountain lion/cougar one evening, even though Fish and Game denies they are out here. It was clear out with a full moon, so I didn't take a flashlight. I was just across the driveway near the fence that marked our property boundary when I heard a rock hit a tree near me from across the fence. It went thwack against that tree, then thump, thump, thump on the ground. My heart began to beat faster as I struggled to see what was there. I couldn't see what threw it, but my first thought was Bigfoot. Sugar didn't bark, but she headed toward the house, tugging on her leash, so I took her advice and backed toward the home, never taking my eyes off that wood line. Then we went inside. I told my husband the next morning, and he said he believed that I had heard something, but highly doubted that it was a Bigfoot. A few days later, a friend came by to do some fishing. We can call him Willie. He took his gear, a water jug, and one of our large handheld spotlights. This was around 5 p.m. when he went down to the creek. Around 7 or 8 after dark, he came running to our front door with no stuff and only one shoe. He was breathing heavily, eyes wide and white as a ghost. When we asked him what had happened, he said, "I don't know what's down there, but it's big and it's really upset." We asked him where all his stuff is, and he just said, "I left it down there and I'm not going back there." He told us that it scared him so bad that it plumb took him out of his own shoe. The next morning, my husband and I went to the dock to get his things. His fishing gear was untouched, but his shoe was missing as well as his water jug. We found his shoe about 30 feet up the creek, and his bottle on the bank about 10 more feet up the stream. My husband didn't know what to think because Willie was a bit of a lush and had the tendency to spin a good yarn now and then, but I believed him. I mean, that man ran out of his shoes and kept running. A few nights later, I was taking Sugar out at approximately 3 in the morning. This time, instead of heading towards the river, I took her towards our gate at the opposite end of the driveway. I took a small handheld spotlight with a click switch on it that night. I had turned off the street light that stood between the house and the shed because we liked to look at the stars. As we walked past the sheds, which was on my right, I heard a loud wham as something huge smacked the side of one of the sheds. I was so startled that when I jumped, I clicked off the light and dropped it at my feet. As fast as I could, I picked it up, turned it on, and scanned the area by the shed. Nothing, absolutely nothing is what I saw. I figure it was hiding behind one of them. This time Sugar ran behind me and barked. I was tired and hadn't forgot to put a leash on her, and backed up toward the house, my heart thumping as we went inside. This went on every 2 weeks or so. He did this for about a month and a half, but each time it smacked the shed and I jumped less and less. I was startled, but I was curious at the same time. I wanted to see what this thing was. After this, I brought my 12-gauge pump with me every night as a safety precaution. After all, there are wild animals and they can be unpredictable, right? Next morning, I told my husband what had happened, and he just looked at me puzzled and gave me this typical spouse who hasn't seen or heard anything in response. "I don't know, baby. Maybe you are imagining things," even after what happened to our friend. I wasn't angry with him for his response. He just hadn't seen or heard it yet. I never pumped my shotgun any of those times that this happened because I never felt threatened. It never growled at me or made any vocalizations. It felt more like it was laughing at me inside, thinking that he was watching a dumb, silly human. I never smelled anything, but think that was because it crosses the river and possibly the creek to get there, depending on where he crosses. One evening, I was on the back deck of barbecuing dinner when, down where the creek and the river meets, I heard a loud guttural sound. It reminded me of a gorilla, but it had a different quality to it. There was much more bass. Like I stated before, our shed is to the right of the house, on the west side. To the right of that shed, we had canoes and a trailer. Beyond those and the house were trees all the way to that creek. Most of the land was wooded and cleared trails throughout. This night it was around 11 p.m. when I took Sugar out. As Sugar and I passed our shed, I heard crashing like an elephant coming through the woods, except it was on 2 legs. It was moving from right to left. behind the canoes toward the house. This time I did pump the 12 gauge and it froze at first. I couldn't hear anything. Then I heard a shuffle in the leaves where it stood. I got the impression that it didn't know what to do at this moment. I just didn't want our puppy being a snack for this thing. I shined the shotgun's flashlight into the woods but didn't see anything, no eye shine or anything. So once again I backed my way toward the house and went in. I figured it must have been shot at before, the way it had froze. I never intended to shoot it unless I really had to. I told my husband upon entering the house what had just happened. So the next morning he went out and take a look and found nothing. But our land was very rocky. He didn't even find any broken tree limbs. He tried to make as much noise as possible back in those trees, but he came nowhere close to making as much noise as that creature had that night before. I couldn't believe he didn't find anything. It really blew my mind. It was so loud it sounded like it was breaking everything in its path. He was beginning to think that I was going nuts, but then, about a week later, he was taking Sugar out with the shotgun in tow when he got a surprise. They got out the door and into the middle of the driveway when the woods on the other side of the fence came something huge crashing through the trees. My husband does not scare very easily. He was raised in the woods of Arkansas by a Vietnam Green Beret veteran turned Southern Baptist preacher, and he himself is a combat veteran. Both my husband and his father are tough old boys. When he pumped that 12 gauge, it just froze like before. He shined the flashlight into the trees high and low, but saw nothing. He said it sounded like a prehistoric mammoth crashing through the woods coming towards him, but he couldn't see or find anything. Much like myself, he backed into the house, shotgun at the ready. A few days later, the neighbors at the gate end of our driveway told us that just after dark the night before, they had chased a large man or creature off of their property. I have always wanted to go back there and see if this thing is still out there, but I can't go out there anymore. I wonder. We moved not long after that. We moved to a suburb of Rogers on Beaver Lake called Prairie Creek. After all this, my husband bought us a Glock 10mm. My son lives with us, so that's 3 Glocks. We now have a house rule. None of us go outside at all without their 10mm. He also bought 2 Rock Island VR-80 semi-automatic 12-gauge shotguns with magazines. He turned our Yukon XL Denali into an adventure vehicle and is planning to get 2 more guns. A Ruger precision rifle in 300 Win Mag and a Lever Martin Action 4570 government. Before we move back out into the country again, which I hope is soon. Thank you for reading this, and let me know what you think about our encounters. Please feel free to use our names, and the events are absolutely true. If you need to edit this, feel free. Wow. That one is just, to me, crazy, because you have 2 military people who were in the military. The husband has seen combat, raised by a dad who was in Vietnam and saw combat, special forces. And to have that first Dogman experience, that's what baffled me when Michelle shared this with me at first, because they had the first Dogman experience, and the husband still kind of didn't buy what she was going through every time she went out for a walk with her dog. Even after the friend had seen something down by the river and creek. It's just almost like he wanted to forget that whole experience. And I can't blame him, for wanting to forget it. Especially after seeing combat and stuff. I mean, really, who wants to go to war with these creatures at all, I got a couple more, maybe one more. I got one more long one, and let's get into it. This next subscriber submitted encounter is not only terrifying, but it is very mind-boggling. You really have to think about things on this one because it's just so crazy. Many of you guys will recognize the person's name in the comment section. It is Inquisitive Southern Woman's Experience. Let's jump into it. Hi, Jeff. First, I want to thank you very much for the very helpful and informative channel you have made for the Dogman community. Thanks to many subscribers, I can now put into words what I saw. So, from October 2008 through the summer of 2010 was a highly spiritual time for me. We lived outside of city limits in an old farmhouse. My usual route I took to work was the new interstate, I-555, to Jonesboro, Arkansas. I worked unusual hours at the time, and they changed daily. The very early morning before my encounter, I was nearly in a major car pileup on an overpass due to freezing fog. It shook me badly, and I even pulled over on the shoulder and called and woke my husband up because I needed his help to calm down. This is why the next very morning I chose to take an alternate route when I saw we had another freezing fog warning on the early news. The best I can describe where it happened was if you go to a community called Painway, Arkansas, then find Old Highway 463. When you do that, you can go to Street View on the map and go towards the town of Truman. Only go about 3 miles down through the past a small community on a gravel road on your left. There will be a thick tree line on your right and fields on your left. So, as I'm driving slowly and cautiously down 463, I saw up ahead a car with its hazard lights going in the opposite lane since there really wasn't a shoulder. I immediately felt that sense of dread, and it increased as I got closer. I remember thinking, please don't step out in front of me and ask for help. Not to be mean, but because I wouldn't feel safe stopping for strangers in such an isolated part. When I got maybe 3 car lengths from the other car, I started seeing 2 dog legs running back and forth in the light of the flasher. It appeared to be scrambling like it was trying to hide, but something definitely was not right. I started talking to myself aloud under my breath, saying, "Where's the dog's other legs? Why are they so huge?" Then, just as I got right up to the front of the car, this thing stepped out all of the way to the yellow line on the highway. It all happened so fast, but I knew my unexplained fear I felt was correct, because this was a very huge werewolf right there. Freezing fog be damned, I stopped on the accelerator in pure panic, yelling to myself, "That's a werewolf, a friggin' werewolf." No statum. There's no such thing. But there it was. Was it chasing someone? Was that why it was scrambling around? Answering myself, I said, "No, you looked for any humans and there weren't any. Just a bleep bleep werewolf. This couldn't be happening." I don't remember getting on the interstate, only driving down it towards my job in a full-out panic. I really wanted to stop somewhere and call my husband, but my body took over and I kept going, gripping the steering wheel, and had the accelerator pushed to the floor. It took a long while to calm down enough so nobody at work would notice and ask me about it, because there is no way I'm telling anybody at work what I noticed, and they'd ask me questions, and I have no way of answering them. And I definitely don't want to tell them that I saw a friggin' werewolf. Luckily, I only saw one person at work until after 8 a.m. And that was roughly 4 hours after the encounter or sighting, or whatever it was. When it was running around the car, I knew it moved too fast to be a dog, only on 2 legs. And when it stepped out right beside me, it stood straight up like a human, but it had this wolf-like head. I'd never heard of Dogman until I was searching real sightings of werewolves. Then your channel popped up. I clocked out of work at 9 a.m. since it was my shorter days, and I knew I had to go back down that road to get home. It was still freezing cold, even though the sun was still brightly shining. I could see way before I got to the spot where the car with its hazard lights were flashing, and there was no sign of it. When I got to the area, I looked out into the field, and there it was. Roughly 20 car lengths away was this huge wolf. It was outrageously huge, slowly, ever so slowly, walking on all 4 toward the opposite way. But then it turned its head back and looked right at me. Thanks to another subscriber of yours, Jeff, I can put this into words. Its face looked at me in an animated way. Its eyes locked with mine, and I knew without a doubt it knew who I was. The way its head rested up against its shoulders is what showed me that the front of this wolf thing was different than a normal wolf. Its upper back had more of a jumped over look to it. It was black as spades and humongous. Stopping never crossed my mind since I was trembling with fear, just like earlier that morning in the dark of the first time I saw it. I had convinced myself not long after this first sighting that whomever was driving that car had turned into a werewolf. Now, with the car completely gone, and there that wolf was, I saw I was wrong. When I got home, my husband called me on his break at work, and I told him everything, explaining just how massive this creature was. It was at least 7 feet tall, and that was not counting his huge long tail. Just from his head to the start of its tail, I was talking so fast and frantically, telling him everything. He knows me better than anyone, so he knew I was not making this up or mistaken at what I had seen. Since then, we periodically will take that road on our way home, looking for my wolf or my werewolf. So many questions ran through my head that month and months later. Like, where did it go for all those hours? Did whomever come back for their car? What was it doing there? Is this Dogman the same as what I've heard men talk about they had seen decades ago, hellhounds? They said their eyes are glowing red. This creature's eyes were not red or glowing, but before finding your channel, Jeff, my husband and I were the only living souls that I've ever told these encounters about. That's a terrifying encounter, and one that fills you with questions. Like, where did the people go? Where did this person go that was in its car? Unless he was hiding in his car, you know? Or maybe the car broke down and someone stopped, a good Samaritan stopped, picked him up to get gas or something. And while he was out, this creature had come from the other side and was crossing the road and kind of in fear was hiding from the next car coming, which would be hers. I've tried to figure, some kind of conclusion at what happened. Obviously, we know that the person that was in the vehicle did not turn into the creature that was later seen in the field because the car wasn't there. If the car was there, I may entertain that thought, but I don't believe these things transform. It'd be impossible, you know? People saying their bones stretch and there's breaking and stuff. It just, to me, it sounds wrong. Who knows, though, you know? I mean, that's just my theory, my view. Your view is different if it is. And if that's the case, that's okay. Because everybody is entitled to their own view. Until we have positive proof, one of these creatures lying in front of us, and, you know, we have definite proof of what these things are, we will never have an answer. Ever. Hopefully someday we do. Sorry about that noise. There's people walking with a boombox or something outside my house. God. Anyway, guys, thank you for all your support. I truly appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Guys, I'm going to be talking to Victor today. Whew, I can't wait. I really can't. And we got a live stream later tonight. So, let's all get ready for it. Hopefully the snow doesn't, we've had days, 50-degree days. We have no snow outside. But you know what they're calling for? Snow. I am so sick of winter. Anyway, enough of the blabbing. Guys, stay safe, stay healthy, and may the Great Spirit watch out for us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life.